Welcome to the Enterprise Sessions. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Jenny Bailey, who is CEO and co-founder of Ferryx. Jenny, I'm really glad you found the time to talk to us. Thank you.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
So before we learn about the Ferryx story, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be at the University of Bristol?
Sure. I did my PhD at Bristol. So I started there. Gosh, when was that? 2004, I started my PhD at Bristol and I was working on gut immunology. It was something that I found interesting in my undergrad degree, and then this opportunity arose and I went for it. And I loved my time at Bristol. I think I worked in a great department. I was based at the vet school at Bristol. I really enjoyed my time there, and after that I was fortunate enough to be offered a postdoc position at Bristol. I sort of hopped into a different group but in the same department, and it was brilliant. I loved the community there, I loved the research environment, and I was really excited about what I was doing.
So did the innovation that became the basis of your company come directly from your research, or it was more something sort of around the edge of your research project?
Exactly. So at the time I was working as a postdoc looking at inflammatory bowel disease. So with my immunology background, I was really interested in the inflammatory pathways that happen within inflammatory bowel disease and potential ways that we can disrupt those. The idea behind the technology in Ferryx came from a chance conversation in a corridor with Tristan Cogan, who's my co-founder. So this was around about 2009. I can vividly remember where we were in the university building, standing at the top of the stairs, just chatting away. Tristan is a microbiologist, and his area of interest is really in sort of microbial communities within the gut, how they interact with one another and how they interact with the host. And we got chatting about, why don't probiotics work in people with inflammatory bowel disease? He'd been doing some work on chickens, looking at how the gut microbiome changes when chickens are stressed. And we came up with this hypothesis that perhaps it's all down to iron. So when you have a chronically inflamed gut, you have high levels of iron present in the gut. And iron, whilst it's really important for us, it can be a bit dangerous when it's in the wrong places, and it can be used as a growth factor by most bacteria present in the gut. But the species that are conventionally used as probiotics can't use that iron as a growth factor, so they can't compete. So we're having this chat in the corridor about, hang on a minute, why don't we try and do something about this? So I say for a long time, this was an unfunded side hustle. It was something that we were both really interested in, really curious about. But we both had other jobs to do. We didn't have any funding for this project, but we used sort of bits of slush money. Tristan was doing some consultancy work, things like that. We used funding like that to just try and keep this ticking over. And very slowly, we started to get somewhere with it. So it all began just from that chance conversation, and that's led us to where we are now.
When you get these creative collisions, two people of similar enough expertise, they speak the same language, but different enough they bring something different to the conversation.
Exactly.
So the iron accumulates in the guts owing to the inflammatory condition.
If you've got bleeding, for example, in the gut, then yes, that can free up iron. If you're stressed as well, noradrenaline can act as an iron shuttle, so that can supply iron to the gut microbiome as well. And also, if you've got chronic inflammation, many patients are on oral iron supplements to counteract the bleeding. So again,
so it can be intrinsic or extrinsic iron, but it's accumulated. And specifically, just checking my own understanding, it's the probiotic bacteria that might otherwise have certain effects are suppressed or less able to do so in the presence of this elevated.
Exactly. Right. So things like lactobacilli and bifidobacteria, the species that we traditionally use as probiotics, they just can't use iron as a growth factor. It's really unusual amongst bacteria, but they can't do it. So our idea was, if we could find something that could use iron as a growth factor and had anti-inflammatory properties, then that could really work during periods of active inflammation.
Okay, so that great hypothesis. I'm totally sold on your hypothesis. But how does one go about finding a microbial community or microbial variants that can thrive in the conditions where the ones we would usually use don't? How did you get that step, particularly as a non-microbiologist?
As a non-microbiologist, I mean, so Tristan is a microbiologist and he's also an avid collector of bacteria. So,
which sounds so weird if you don't know microbiologists, but I know a few of them as well.
Exactly. This is quite normal in the microbiology world, that anything a bit weird and wonderful, you'll just pop that in the freezer because you never know, and it might be useful later on. We came up with sort of a blueprint. These are the sort of features that we would want to see in a probiotic bacteria. And we set about screening And we started off with about 200 isolates, and we funneled them down through a series of rational tests. So first and foremost, looking for things that could increase growth rate and response to iron. Looking for indicators of efficacy. We looked at safety as well, particularly in terms of antimicrobial resistance, because obviously if you're going to put a probiotic into somebody, you want to make sure that it's not carrying a load of antimicrobial resistance genes. We looked at production of harmful metabolites. We looked at mutagenicity. So we took them through these series of rational tests, and we came out with something at the end. This strain of Streptococcus thermophilus called FX856. And in all our in vitro trials, this performed really well. So the next thing that we did then was to take that through a mouse model of colitis. So this was a DSS mouse model of colitis. And in this model, we saw that this strain of bacteria was able to reduce clinical signs of disease. It reduced body weight loss, and it reduced gastrointestinal bleeding, two of the key symptoms of inflammatory bowel disease. And that was our eureka moment.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That was the, and I was working from home that day. This was pre-pandemic, but I was working from home. I can't remember why. And I got the email that came in with the data, and I immediately picked up the phone to Tristan and said, "This is it. We've got something here. It's absolutely incredible." Before that, we got fairly good evidence from our in vitro tests, but this was the eureka moment for us.
I think that's really interesting, because I think a lot of people who aren't scientists and don't work or don't know science as well, they picture science as eureka moments. And actually, in reality, I think that's quite rare. I think it's much more commonly incremental. And what you described was incremental, clearly. But nevertheless, there was this moment when all the hairs on your arms stands up.
Absolutely.
I mean, what an amazing moment. At this point, were you still thinking of this as a research project? Or by this time, had this started in your own mind to become a commercial proposition?
Yeah, it started to, we'd had the idea that we discovered this thing, it was performing really well. It almost felt criminal to sort of leave it languishing in university labs. We wanted to do something about it. So even before we got some of that data, when we're still looking at sort of our in vitro data, we'd spoken to the research enterprise and development team at Bristol to get some advice on what do we do with this? How do we protect our IP? So they'd helped us with, they filed the patents for us to help us to protect our IP. Even before we published papers on this, it was all completely protected. And we've been talking to them about how we might commercialize this research, because it's stuff we felt responsible that we wanted to be able to get this out there.
So at that point, you were ready to move this into a more commercial domain, and you could see that was going to be a necessity, if this wasn't, in your words, to languish in the lab. So what was that step? What did you do next to move that forward?
So I was a postdoc at the time. I had no idea about commercializing research and how to do it. Unfortunately, our technology transfer officer in Red was absolutely amazing, and she held our hand throughout the whole process and really helped us. And the pivotal moment for us came when we did the ICure program through SETsquared. And this threw me well out of my comfort zone, which I was absolutely terrified of it, but it's the most positive thing that I could have done for this project. And it gave me sort of 3 months of protected time out of the lab to be able to go and speak to people and find out what was needed. So the challenge was to speak to 100 different people, so stakeholders, potential end users, clinicians, manufacturers, anybody that might be involved in this journey to commercialization, and to really sort of test the market to find out, are we on the right track? What do people want? Is there a place for this in the market? And it made me learn to talk to people about this, which was really important. It made me learn how to make this accessible to people and not get bogged down in the science, which as an academic, of course, that's what you want to do. This is your baby. This is what you spend all your time doing. Exactly. You want to talk to people about the intricate details of your science, but when you've got 30 seconds to convince somebody to have a further conversation with you, you need to make it sound exciting quickly. And that was really nerve-wracking. But it was fabulous training because my goodness, were we thrown in the deep end with that. So it was brilliant, but it gave us that opportunity to, again, go out there and talk to people. I would never have done that alone. I would never have thought. We contacted people like Crohn's and Colitis UK. And the reception that we got there was fantastic. It was, why don't you come along and give a talk at one of our medical education events and talk to patients and find out what they want. And we got some incredible data from that. It was absolutely amazing. Those conversations were so valuable. And that's really helped to drive the product development all the way through then. And that was the moment where we sort of decided that, yes, we need to do something about this. At the end of the program, you do something called the options roundabout, where you pitch your proposition to a panel of experts, and they will then tell you what the best route to market for your product is.
Tell us where you are now. So you've launched your first product now. This is actually out there in the marketplace. Yes. So how is that going? And having done that, like, are you done, or are there more things you want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had our first investment at the beginning of 2022. And that enabled us to really focus on product development. So one of the great things about our product is that whilst eventually we want to take it through clinical trials and have it as a pharmaceutical product to be available on prescription for people with gut inflammation, because of its safety profile, we have immediate access to the food supplement market. So we chose to go down that route for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we can use this to generate data, which can help us then to plan our clinical studies. It can inform the design of our clinical trial, and it can de-risk the proposition for further investment as well. If we've already got some data that shows that we get efficacy of this product, then that can really be beneficial for us moving forwards. Also, it's another revenue stream. Having a product on the market, having sales coming in, then it reduces the amount of investment that we need further down the line. So we launched our first product, Ferrocalm, at the end of 2022. So we spent last year doing all the branding around it, working out the manufacturing process and getting that to be a finished, beautiful product. I will say we hired a designer who's done an amazing job. We get so many compliments on the packaging, and I'm so proud of this product. We launched it at the back end of last year. We are currently selling that via our website. But say we're not just doing that to generate revenue, we want data as well. So when we launched, we conducted a trial in 25 individuals with gut symptoms run by a contract research organisation. So this is independent data. And we were asking people to take the product for 8 weeks. At the start and end of that, they were asked to give a stool sample for microbiome analysis, and they underwent a physical examination by a GP. And then every 2 weeks, they were interviewed by a nurse to track their symptoms and their quality of life. We're starting to get the data through from that now. It's amazing. I can't tell you what it is at the moment, but it's absolutely amazing. And I'm really, really excited. We're also running our own trial as well, whereby anybody who buys a product from their website, if they buy 2 months supply, then again, they're being sent the same surveys. They're self-reporting their symptoms every 2 weeks. And again, we're getting some amazing data back from that. We asked people to try the product for 8 weeks. We didn't expect that within the first 2 weeks of taking the product, 68% of people say they feel better.
That's extraordinary.
It's incredible.
And what sorts of symptoms are they reporting have alleviated? When they say better, is there any substance, or not substance, but is there any more detail you can give on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we've been asking people generally, do you feel better? But then we've been asking them to quantify their symptoms. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how severe is their bloating, loose stool, constipation, abdominal pain, cramping. So we're looking at these sort of common features that are part of things like irritable bowel syndrome. So a lot of our customers will suffer from IBS. It affects 15% of the global population. If you don't have it yourself, you'll know somebody who does. It's something that affects so many people. And we are seeing real improvements in these parameters. People are giving us testimonials. They're giving us reviews on Trustpilot, which is amazing, saying about how this has made them feel so much better. I had one through last week from somebody who said that they're now able to eat the food that they want to eat. Previously, their diet had been quite restricted, but through taking this product now, they can eat what they want to eat, which is just incredible.
seeing those testimonials, the data as the scientist, and you must be enormously satisfying. The testimonials for the human being must be very warming. What would Jenny of, let's say, 2009 have thought if you could have sort of, sent those testimonials back in time and said, do this is what you're going to see? Like, how would that have been?
I would never have believed it, to be honest. I still don't, the emails come straight through to my email inbox. And I don't mind admitting that the first one that came through, when we got the first results back from the first person who said, this has really made a difference in my life, I cried because I couldn't believe that, something that we'd started as this side hustle, just out of curiosity, had actually benefited someone. And that's a really special moment. It's when you see that impact. That is such a special moment.
That's so wonderful. It must be so satisfying to see this science really affecting individual people's lives. Is there anything you would do differently if you were to do this again?
I think it would have been very difficult to do any sort of the science. If we could have accelerated that through more funding, then that would have been great. But I think personally, for me, myself, it was let go of the fear. Just give it a go and see what happens. Don't be afraid. Just try it. I think I was quite blinkered in my view of where my career was going. And 4 years ago, it took a complete different direction. And I love it. It's the best thing that I could have done. I thoroughly enjoy what I do. I find it incredibly fulfilling. I'm learning new things all the time. And it's great. So just go for it.
So if you were looking back to Jenny and Tristan at the top of the stairs in 2009, what would you say if you parachuted into that conversation? What advice would you give?
Just do it. Don't hold back. Just do it. I think, back in those days, it was, this is interesting. Let's just see what we can do with it, but I've got a lecture and I've got students and I've got this other project going on, and don't let it lapse. Go with it. Keep focused. Keep going. And don't be afraid.
That's all for this enterprise session. But join us again soon to hear more about the way our amazing staff and students are translating their enterprising ideas into real-world impact. And do please click on the links if you'd like to contact the University of Bristol.